Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to Living Islam, our Shahr Ramadan special this month. My name is Nasreen Kazmi, and on today's show we're going to be talking about the importance of the Holy Quran with our special Shahr Ramadan reminders with Sister Ayman Hirji. Also coming up on today's show we're going to have the first segment of Sister Afroz Zaidi's book review, which is going to be on The Idols Will Fall this week, inshallah. Also, I'm going to be announcing the lucky winner of last week's quiz competition on fasting in Shahr Ramadan. And also, we have a brand new quiz this week on the topic of the Holy Quran. But first, it's Ayman Hirji with her Shahr Ramadan reminders. Assalamu alaikum, Ayman.
Wa alaikum salam.
This week we're talking about the importance of the Holy Quran. Now, there's a link between this very special month of Shahr Ramadan and the Holy Quran as well. It reminds me of a hadith of Imam Jafar Sadiq, actually Imam Rida alayhi salam. Excuse me, I got that wrong. Imam Rida alayhi salam, a man came to Imam Rida and asked him, what is the reason that Muslims fast in the month of Shahr Ramadan? Why not any other month? And Imam Rida alayhi salam explained it's because the Quran was revealed in this particular month. So it's out of a sort of respect and honour that we also fast in this particular month. And as we saw in last week's quiz as well, there was 3 other holy books that were revealed in this particular month. So quite clearly there is a link there between the Quran and this month already.
Definitely, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You have mentioned the importance of the month due to the reverence of the Quran. And you see this reflected beautifully in Surah Qadr anyway, which starts with Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. So the idea that the introduction of Laylatul Qadr is made to the reference of the Quran. And along with this there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says that everything has a spring, and the spring of the Quran is the month of Shahr Ramadan. So to acquire the benefits of Shahr Ramadan to the maximum, we've been given this month, the Quran within the month of Shahr Ramadan. And I think if you ponder about the hadith, it makes a bit more sense when you think about these things, rather than just take the words and sort of repeat the hadith again and again. When you think about spring, it's the time when the earth is all dead, literally, from the winter, and it's the time that the earth comes to life again. So it's the first shoots that you see, the first flowers that you see the animals who are hibernating now wake up and come back to life and start their life routine and life cycle again. So for Rasulullah to say that the spring of the Quran is Shahr Ramadan,
it's giving new life.
It means for us that there is a treasure in the Quran that we can acquire the greatest amount from within this month especially. Of course, the Quran is eternal, we know, and that its benefits and its messages for till the end of time. But within this month especially, we can maximize on this to an extent that is beyond, that brings life not only to the Quran, doesn't bring the Quran alive, but also brings us to life, because the Quran is a mode of life-giving information, life-giving guidance, life-giving direct revelation from Allah. So a conversation with yourself and Allah. And in this month we feel that closeness to Allah even more. And for us to have that conversation with Allah every day becomes essential.
Definitely. And many of us, we want to be as productive as we possibly can in this month. And we want to, like you said, optimize our time in worship and in getting to know and getting more familiar with the Holy Quran and reciting it and looking at the tafsir and translation and everything else. But what advice can you give to the viewers in how we can make the most of this, if you like, in incorporating it into our everyday life?
Well, we can do so many different things, but I think if we need to make some mental preparations as well as psychological preparations, where we tell ourselves and we remind ourselves of the rewards of the recitation of the Quran. And we know so many different ahadith. I'm going to just give you a few that have come to mind, different ones that talk about different aspects. One is Rasulullah says about the Quran in this month. He says one ayah recited within this month of the Quran, you get the equivalent reward of reciting the entire Quran in any other month.
Goodness.
Now this is something we don't even do. If you really again think about the hadith, some of us, alhamdulillah, manage to complete the Quran in other months. Some of us don't touch the Quran till it's the month of Shahr Ramadan. So really we're getting a benefit that's beyond even counting.
Yeah.
And it's just even one ayah. And sometimes we think, oh, I can't be bothered to pick up the Quran and recite it. But you already know some surahs which are part of the Quran.
Yeah.
Like Surah Al-Hamd, you recite it every single day. You recite Surah Ikhlas, you recite Falaq, Nas, you recite Kawthar. All these short surahs that you recite are part of the Quran. This is a recitation of the Quran too. To add on to that, there's another hadith that it is better to recite the Quran, even if it's from memory, to read, to look at the verses, to look at the book and recite. So there is benefit to look, to even look at the wordings of the Quran when we read.
Yeah.
So when we're reciting, we should also look at the book when we're reciting, even if we know these verses from memory.
Because you're engaging all your senses as well. So if you're reciting
like
it out
we said
loud.
a long time ago about adhan, how we have to be focused, and our focus is directed then when we sit and open a book and we look at the words. So we're engaging all our senses. On top of that, there is another hadith of Rasulullah that says that to recite the Quran loudly and to recite it softly. You know, some of us prefer to read it very softly and to recite it a little loudly so that it's heard. He says that's the difference between a closed bottle of perfume and one that's opened.
Wow, beautiful analogy.
He says, so the Quran doesn't only have an impact on you, but you know, like we said, engaging the senses, you're not only looking, reciting, but you're also engaging the sense of listening. So exhorting yourself. As you're reciting, you're admonishing yourself. You're teaching yourself what you're reciting. So you know, like when we teach our children things, we ask them to repeat and repeat loudly.
Yeah.
So that we learn through this, that they're learning. So when we read the Quran out loud, we understand that we're actually taking it in. So it's not only just looking, but you've seen the words, but reading, so you've acknowledged it with your tongue, and understanding through your ears. And we know that the eyes are the windows to the soul, we've heard.
Definitely.
We know that whatever we hear goes to our heart, goes up, down to our soul. So all these senses affect the way we take stuff in, and these are the means of acquiring all the information and the guidance from Allah. One of the means, some of the means of acquiring this information. So reciting the Quran in a mode that when we recite, it's like fragrance, really, truly it's like fragrance. And we know in the time of Rasulullah that when it was through the recitation of Quran that a lot of people converted to the religion of Islam. That when they heard about the Quran and the fadilah of the Quran or the Quran being recited, the beauty of the recitation of the
jinns.
Quran. Exactly, superbly mentioned. That the jinns came to Rasulullah at that time and said, we've heard this recitation before and we bring faith on this. So it is one of the ways of stimulating our soul to the real path, to the truth, and waking our conscience. So when we recite Quran out loud, it awakens our soul. So really Quran has so many more benefits than we give it credit for.
Definitely.
And I think I remember this story, mentioned it many times now. I remember I got it passed down in an email about this grandfather who used to recite the Quran without understanding. And his son used to say to him, his young grandson said to him, you know, why do you do this? You don't even understand the words. So his grandfather didn't respond. He just said to him, I have this metal bucket. I want you to go and fill, and it had holes in the bottom. And then he said, I want you to fill it with water. It was all rusty and black and everything. And he asked him to go and fill water and bring it to him. So the little boy goes and fills the basket with water, but obviously because it's a basket and it's got holes, it wasn't a bucket, it was a basket, he can't manage to bring the water back. His grandfather said, I want water in this basket, so go again. He makes him do this a few times over, and then he comes back and he says, look, this is impossible, the grandson says to his grandfather. His grandfather says, well, look down into the basket, and when he looks down, he sees that the basket is completely clean of all the rust and dirt that it had. He said, this is the effect of the Quran on me. This is how I see the Quran affects me. That I may not understand it, but the recitation is just as important. So definitely the recitation is one of the levels of the Quran that we must at least make an effort to open and recite.
Definitely.
And then obviously there are other levels to it that we can acquire as we go along. And keeping in mind the hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which he said in his last wasiyah, was Allah Allah bil Quran. He said that I exhort you to the Quran, that no one should precede it before you. That no one should have all the information and the knowledge acquired from it other than you believers. Because Allah has given you this gift of the Quran, and it's like a haqq on you, isn't it? That you have the Quran in your possession, and yet you don't seek guidance from it. And it is that we've heard that the Quran will speak on the day of Qiyamah and say, I was the book that was neglected, that was put aside on the shelves, respected but never turned to when it was required. So I think it's important for us to at least pick it up, open it, look at it, read it, even if it's a few verses. At least to make that intention, especially in this month,
Inshallah.
to recite a little bit of the Quran.
Definitely, that's a very, very good point you made there. And also, there is this importance to recite it in the language, the Arabic language, but then how important is it to set some time aside to look at the translation and tafsir as well?
That's super important, because when you're reading something, you need to also understand it. It's important to understand the message of Allah. This is Allah's communication to you. So yes, you've read it, but do take time aside to focus on a few verses, a few surahs, and then find information on them, research about them, basic information. Which surah of the Quran is it? What does it talk about? Refer to translations. I know the interpretations, but it's better to at least refer to those and know what the surah is talking about, so you're aware of what the Quran is telling you. And then the Quran has multiple benefits, whether it's only spiritual benefits, physical benefits. So get into a habit of learning maybe the small du'as of the Quran. You know, Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. Very short du'a. Rabbi zidni ilman. You can teach it to your children. These are words, the verses and words from the Quran that if you practice, you can recite in your kunut every day. Whenever you're lost for words, refer to the Quran for these du'as. Memorize short surahs at a time. You know, even I think get this juz that you get, so it's easier for you to carry the Quran around and read wherever and whenever you are. People who travel on the train, people who sit at doctor's appointments, when you're sitting somewhere and you have nothing else to do, take out your Quran and read the juz of the Quran.
This is true. They've got that very small surah Yaseens now that you can slip it into your wallet. Or
carry
your
this.
purse.
Everything is accessible. At the most, let's extend it to a point where you cannot read it and you don't have time to sit down and read. You can listen.
On your iPod
engage your
as well.
senses, listen to it, play it in the background, and the more familiar you get with the surah, the more familiar you're getting with the Quran, because it has the instruction of our life for us, and that is our greatest responsibility, is to take all the life lessons and our guidance from the Quran. Because if it is the Huda and it's the Hadi and it's the Furqan, then for us it should mean those things. That it is Nur for us in our lives. That it is really the Furqan for us in our lives.
Definitely. Now, in this month particularly, people want to read as much of the Holy Quran. In fact, try to finish the Quran in the 30 days if possible. What tips can you give the viewers to finish it as in that time period?
Well, it's a good idea to set aside time for recitation of Quran. I know we're busy with doing a lot of things, cooking, going to masjid, getting involved in different voluntary acts, but it's also important to spend some time. One of the recommendations is to recite a little after every salah.
Okay.
So if you make it a habit to recite a little part of the Quran after every salah, and how you break down the Quran is you can either do it yourself or refer to one of the methods. I think it's posted, we can post it on our Facebook wall, right? The 4 pages after every salah. Or you can break it down to how you prefer. You recite with the manzils that are already in the Quran, you recite a ruku. You break it down to how you feel is comfortable. And then there will be this inclination to recite it. Once you stop and you think, okay, I have 5 minutes, you'll pick it up and you'll read it on your own. So make that conscious effort of saying, I want to do this and I will try and do it. And like I said, the juz, they're very slim. You can carry them around with you everywhere you go. You can recite 3 at a time. I promise you can. Because wherever you're sitting, if you're just sitting and you think, okay, I'm not doing anything, just sit and recite a few pages.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about this in previous shows as well, that there are so many opportunities that we have in our day. The 24 hours, subhanAllah, Allah's given us so many different opportunities, whether it's sitting on the bus and you can read your Quran, or waiting in the doctor's surgery, you can do your tasbih. There's so many different opportunities that Allah has given us.
It's how we utilize it.
Yeah, exactly. If we utilize it in the best of a way, we'll find that we can fill our day more productively with more.
Even making targets for memorization. So like for example, we were talking about earlier, the Surah A'la is one of the surahs that helps in memorization and makes your memory sharp.
Excellent tip.
And so if you want to memorize, start to memorize one surah of the Quran, focus on it, learn everything you can about it, and then practice it by reciting it in your salah. So every salah you recite that surah, or continuously recite it throughout the day, so that you have familiarity with the surah. And again, I said, go back to reading it from the Quran again and again. So you have this mental image of the surah in your head as well as knowing where it is at in the Quran. So the more you look at it, the easier it is to memorize as well. You know, we tend to close the book and read, but the more you look at the surah, the more easier it is to memorize it.
And about Surah A'la, they say that if you recite it a lot, it does sharpen your memory, but if you commit it to memory, it gives you a photographic memory.
It does.
So it helps you to then learn other things and learn the other surahs in the Quran.
And if you want to learn a lot about the Quran, then pick up the words. Like, you know, people want to learn the Arabic language of the Quran, then pick up a book where, like Q Fatima has like amazing ways of learning the Quran, names of the surahs of the Quran, words that are repeated in the Quran. So whenever you come across that word, you will learn what it means. And so your understanding of the Quranic Arabic will start to increase. So when you refer to the English, you'll know what
so you
means
start to
what.
recognize words and meanings and make connections.
Very simple words like nar, jahannam. We know these words already, you know, but the more they're repeated, the more we understand of the Quran. You know, we know Jannatun tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. We all know what this means. It means Allah's promise that there will be gardens and there will be rivers flowing underneath. Because we're constantly told about these verses, and we've remembered our words. So the more you repeat to yourself, the more you learn of the Quran, inshallah.
Definitely. Also, is there any particular times in the day that it's recommended to recite Quran more than others?
According to the Quran itself, the Quran recited at the time of Fajr is the one that's witnessed by all creation, especially the angels. But
and if you recite loudly, the angels would listen, would surround you to listen.
And it's actually more fruitful when you recite loudly. You feel like you've done some exercise of some sort, because you've exercised your muscles, you've exercised your lungs, you've recited out loud. You feel like, okay, I've done something, and you've listened to something. So you feel like you've utilized that time for something rather than just quickly read through something. But in this time of the month, every moment is opportune to recite Quran. If, like I said, if you don't get any time, repeat the verses of the Quran that you already know by heart. Surah Qadr especially, Surah Ikhlas, Surah Fatiha, whichever surahs that you know, make an effort to at least repeat these throughout the day.
Okay, so Surah Qadr would be highly recommended, particularly in this month.
Well,
but any surahs,
any part of the Quran, but definitely Surah Qadr has benefits of its own anyway, and has great benefits throughout this month as well, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll come back to more tips on the Holy Quran. Now it's time for our special book review with Sister Afroz Zaidi, where she's reviewing this book for us this week. It's The Idols Will Fall. So I'm really looking forward to this. So take a look at this, inshallah.
And welcome to the book review segment on Living Islam. My name is Afroz Zaidi Javraj. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Idols Will Fall, which is by Muhammad Saeed Bahmanpour. It was originally written in Persian, translated, not really translated, but adapted to English by Amina Inlows. And it's essentially, it says the sub-heading under the main title is The Story of the Sleepers of the Cave, which is Ashab al-Kahf for Muslims, for the Muslim audience. And it's basically a historic account of the events faced by the Ashab al-Kahf. Because it's in English, a lot of the Roman names have been used, and the Roman name for the king as well, which is Daqyanus in Persian, but Diocletian in English, or in Roman, the Roman names being used, and then the Roman names of the companions as well. And it's essentially, the author writes about how there are various historic accounts of the companions, of where they might have been based, of where the cave would have been based. But at the end of the book, he gives a detailed sort of account of the things he took into consideration when he put this particular book together, essentially based on certain archaeological evidence, based on historic facts that he found to be the most compelling. And so he put together this particular account. I don't think he claims, and I don't think any reader could claim, that this is essentially to the letter exactly what happened to the companions of the cave, but at the same time it is definitely a bringing to life of that story. I think the most admirable thing about it is the fact that for viewers today, for readers like you and I, it brings to life this story about companions that were set in the past, that were in this Roman, pre-Constantinople era, and it brings it to life for us. It allows us to relate to these people that lived so far away in land in a time so removed from ours. And that is really pretty much the most admirable and the most attractive thing about the book. In terms of critique for the book, not that there is that much to critique, I would simply say, if there was one thing that I would change about the book, is that following the episode where Ia Melikos, who is the main companion, one of the main companions mentioned, following the episode where him and the companions retreat to the cave based on the command from Allah, there's a very kind of linear progression of facts following the descendants of Ia Melikos through history and the historical events surrounding these descendants. And at times it becomes slightly monotonous, slightly deviating away from the main, I think, the purpose of the book, and slightly dry historical fact rather than contributing in, I suppose, a more positive way to the main message of the book. And so I would, if I were editing this book or if I were adapting it, I would really be quite ferocious in probably eliminating a lot of those facts. Maybe even stopping at the point where companions go to sleep and then wake up, and how they find themselves in that situation, so that the reader can discover that along with them, can feel that same sense of curiosity that they feel. And if perhaps a second edition of the book were to come out, then this is the advice that I personally would give. Also, taking out those facts that become quite dry, and instead replacing them maybe with a bit more detail about the women in the book, is something that I would have found personally, as a woman, as a female reader, more rewarding. Also, it would have definitely put women in Islam in a more positive light for a non-Muslim audience. Certainly, having gone through some of the Iranian movie version of this book, women do seem to play quite an important role. They make a important contribution, and in that sense, I would have liked to see more pronounced characterization of the important female characters, namely the wives of the companions who retreated into the cave, and that's it really as far as critique goes. But I mean, apart from that, one of the most amazing things about this book is that feeling of knowing what these companions who were so close to Allah, who were chosen by Allah, knowing how they felt, knowing how they prayed. And the author has definitely done a stellar job of allowing the reader to get into that mind frame by seeing the way that Ia Melikos prays, by seeing the way that Maximilian prays, even by seeing the way that Ia Melikos's great-grandson prays when he is passing away. All of these things allow the reader to get into the minds and to really get inspired by the spirituality of these companions, and that's definitely one of the most positive effects of this book. It also gives really, really compelling arguments for things like the existence of God, for things like the Muslim as opposed to the Christian belief in Jesus Christ, and in a way that, I mean, I can't speak for non-Muslims, but in a way that I certainly found that it would compel a non-Muslim reader to go away and ponder these questions without being offended, without feeling like their religious views were being attacked, and certainly in all those respects, and in many more, this book is highly recommended, definitely for all Muslim readers, and particularly for those who would like to learn more about, if you would like to call it pre-Islamic history of Islam, or the history of Islam prior to Prophet Muhammad, so how it followed on from Jesus Christ, how the message was lost, and how these companions held on to the true message of Jesus. And how it follows on from there, it's definitely for that and for much more, just for the learning experience, a really compelling and highly recommended read. Thank you very much, viewers, for watching. If you have any comments, we have our Facebook page, Living Islam. If you would like to leave any comments on there on today's book review, if you would like to leave any suggestions on books that you have read and have found inspiring and would like me to review, please do post them on the Facebook page. Thank you again. My name is Afroz Zaidi Javraj. Inshallah, see you next time on Living Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much to Sister Afroz Zaidi, who kindly reviewed that book for us. And it sounds very interesting. And you've read it, haven't you, Sister Ayman? What did you think?
I think she put it better than me.
Alhamdulillah. I think I will have a read of it myself.
It is an amazing account of the sleepers of the cave. And I think it allows you to, like Afroz mentioned quite rightly, sort of step back into history and like watch what's happening and observe how it relates to us today. Actually makes more sense, because it's in a time when there's so much confusion about what the truth is and what's real and what's not, and the message is being corrupted and lost, and we can see that happening now. And it's quite powerful in the way that just a handful of individuals, just 7 to 8 people, come together to hold on to this pristine message,
SubhanAllah,
and stand up against the the most difficult and most dictators of rulers, and Allah, how He protects those who stand up for the truth. And that's a very powerful message that He puts through.
Allah is always going to help those who stay sincere to Him. I think you both sold it to me. I think I'm going to read it. Thank you very much for that. And now it's time for our special quiz competition. Before we go through to this week's questions, I have to announce last week's winner, who was Zubaydah Mubarak. So congratulations to Sister Zubaydah Mubarak. You are last week's winner of the Quran competition, the Quran quiz. Now, this week's competition starts with the questions on this week's show, which was the Holy Quran. Sorry, last week's was fasting Shahr Ramadan. This week's is on the Holy Quran. So here are the questions for this week. Question number 1, which surah of the Quran does not begin with Bismillah? So which surah of the Quran does not begin with Bismillah? So the name of that surah, please. Okay, question number 2 is, what are the largest and smallest creatures mentioned in the Holy Quran? So the largest creature and the smallest creature mentioned in the Holy Quran. Okay, number 3, which surah of the Quran is known as Quran? So which surah of the Quran is known as Quran? Question number 4, name 3 sets of prophets mentioned in the Quran that were father and son. So if we can name 3 sets of prophets mentioned in the Quran that were father and son. Okay, question number 5, in which surah of the Quran is Ayat Tathir mentioned? So in which surah of the Quran is Ayat Tathir mentioned? Okay, and then question number 7, in which surahs of the Quran is hijab mentioned? So that's question number 6. In which surahs of the Quran is hijab mentioned? And finally, question number 7, which surah is considered to be a third of the Holy Quran? So which surah is considered to be a third of the Holy Quran? So those are the 7 questions on this week's quiz, which is on the subject of the Holy Quran, which we've spoken about tonight. And I think if you listen very carefully, maybe Sister Ayman mentioned the answers. Also, I want to let you know of our Facebook group and page. Some people were saying that they can't post any answers to the group. So we've set up a Facebook page now as well. So you can send the answers in the Facebook page group. Make sure you don't put them on the wall, because people will copy your answers. So just inbox them. We also have an email address that you can email the answers to. That's livingislam@hidayat.tv. That's livingislam@hidayat.tv. Okay, good luck to you all with that, inshallah. Also, the winner, we will be sending a surprise prize over to you in the post, inshallah. Now, don't miss next week's show, when myself and Sister Ayman will be talking about, what are we talking about next week?
Laylatul Qadr.
Laylatul Qadr.
Inshallah.
That should be an interesting one, inshallah. So we're talking about Laylatul Qadr and the all-important Shahr Ramadan reminders. Also, tomorrow's show, don't miss, Dua Iftitar, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at this dua with Sister Naseem Bir Muhammad. And also we have a brand new book review with Sister Afroz Zaidi, and this time she's going to be reviewing the book 3,000 Miles for a Wish by Safiya Hussain. Okay, thank you very much, Jazakallah khair, for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 4:30. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.